What we're going to put up on the screen is a statement. If you agree with the statement now, I want you to clap as loud as you can. So, AI can't create real art. Clap if you agree with this. If you disagree with this, now clap. Oh, that is very close, very interesting. Okay, good. Well, we're very divided on this topic, which is the perfect setup for this debate. We will come back and do this again at the end of the session to see if either side of this debate have moved you. So with no further ado, we have two gentlemen here to debate this today. One is the old books guy on X, or what we used to call Twitter, and the other is a sculptor and a maker of stuff. Please welcome Jash Dholani and Neil Mendoza. All right, guys, so let's get going. And we're going to do 35 minutes of a debate here, and then we'll have some questions for the audience. So first of all, can AI ever be anything other than simply a tool? Is it simply for use, or can it also create truth?
AI has no truth, right? It's a tool. At best, it's a tool. At worst, it pretends to be a tool while being something else. Truth is only important when you know what to do with it. AI has no direction. It has no goals that it wants to reach. So when I know the truth about what this mic does, right, its function, it serves a human purpose. It helps my voice reach people at the back. But AI has no purpose. It has nothing that it is driving towards. And so AI is like this glorified tool which pretends to be the artist.
So he's making a perfect argument about why AI can make art, because AI is a tool. AI doesn't exist in a vacuum where it decides, I'm going to make some art today. AI is always under the control of a human being. So AI is a tool, and it's an amazing tool, and it's a capacity amplifier. So I don't think AI can make art on its own, but that's never going to be the argument, because AI doesn't exist in a vacuum. We created AI, and we use AI, and artists use AI as a tool. The same arguments were applied when the camera appeared. Baudelaire said, the camera is a mortal enemy of art, because a camera suddenly can do what a painter could do. You get these master painters who have spent thousands of hours learning how to paint, and suddenly you press a button. And there's a direct parallel with writing a prompt, and everyone's like, oh no, this is the death of art. Another philosopher, De La Roche, said, when he saw a photograph for the first time, this is the death of painting. But it wasn't the death of painting, it was the freeing up of painting from a documentary form to explore what painting was as a medium. So I think it is
But it was never documentary. The painting was never Name a photograph more famous than the Mona Lisa, right? So if the camera was really good at portraits and at clicking human faces, why is the most famous human face of all time a painting? It's not a photograph. The artist always did more than copy a face. It added a layering and a detailing and a certain soul to it and a certain style to it, which a camera has never been able to recapture. And
no,
I think the camera absolutely destroyed photography, the painting and the visual arts, because the visual arts became, they sort of went towards ugliness, and they went towards, no, absolutely, the visual arts
so
totally
you're discounting
decayed.
all of painting since the camera was invented as not really worthwhile. So all of the kind of abstract art, you would say, is not art.
A lot of it isn't art. Yeah, abstract art isn't art. A lot of it isn't art, because people look at abstract art and they are like, oh, you need to read like 4 paragraphs to understand what it is. I think AI art only comes up in a context where people have been forced to consume ugly aesthetics in the name of modern art, and then they look at AI art and they're like, wow, the AI art is better than the modern art, and fine, it is. But then the modern art wasn't that good to begin with. And I think, yeah, the camera absolutely, by portraiture is such a beautiful art form, and it totally distracted people away from that old art form. Now we don't have portrait artists like Leonardo da Vinci anymore, because the camera really acted as this like distracting, it is a beautiful tool. I use my phone camera all the time, but it just acted as this like demoralizing, distracting tool. And I think that's what I fear with AI, that it's not necessarily that the AI is going to force people to do this or do that, but because it demoralizes you, tells you your brain doesn't work, your brain isn't big enough, your brain isn't as big as the data center, and your brain isn't fast enough, and you're a human being with weaknesses. So just export all your decision making to the machine. That's where the problem is.
So I think that art historians would have a large disagreement with you that the whole of the art world since the invention of the camera is worthless. But you mentioned Da Vinci in that as a great portrait artist, and he was a user of technology as a tool. He invented his own tools. He used tools which took what you would call humanness out of it and allowed him to kind of precisely paint things using tools just like AI. If Da Vinci was alive today, he would be a heavy AI user. He would be using the tools of the day.
Da Vinci would not use AI.
Can I ask a question here on this? So you talk about the AI being a tool like a hammer, but a hammer does not interpret the nail. The hammer does not interpret my throw. The hammer reacts to the physics of it. So if you have a AI, obviously you enter a prompt, and it must interpret what you're saying. So the act of interpretation is itself a creative process, typically we'd think for people. So is that really, can you really equate it to a normal tool? Tools like a paintbrush, a camera doesn't interpret your intentions.
It's a different tool to one that's ever been before. I mean, there are similar tools, like generative art is a very recent form of art that happened before AI, where people would create algorithms to generate art pieces, and a lot of people would take that seriously as art, and that was also based on probability. AI systems, I guess, artificial intelligence is kind of a misnomer. They're just very complicated, massive probability systems. So yeah, it is interpreting what you put in based on probability. Someone like Jackson Pollock also used probability. He's like, I'm going to,
But you think interpretation is fine? It's still a tool.
It's still a tool, and I think it's going to be the same as any other tool. The people who don't have that many skills are going to just use the tool to empower themselves to be kind of like one rung up the ladder. The masters aren't going to use the tool. The masters are going to control the tool. Like, I think the people using AI the most successfully aren't just putting it, like, if I just put a prompt in and say, write a book for me, I agree, that's not art. If I put a prompt in and then combine it with 10 other AI systems and push the AI by feeding it, like, if it was a visual thing, feeding it a depth map, the more masterly control you have of AI, the more it can empower you as a creator to do things which were never possible before. It's not a zero-sum game. It's making things possible which were never possible in the past.
So you're saying it's one tool in a big toolbox.
But it's not a tool. And even if it is a tool, I'll tell you why it's a bad tool, right? So the difference between a pencil and an AI image generator is this. The pencil makes me struggle. I pick up the pencil, I try to draw your face, I just cannot capture your detailing, right? And I'm just struggling with the lines, and I'm like struggling with, the eye shape, and it is a tool that allows me to struggle and improve. What the AI image prompt will do is it'll just give me a passing copy of your face, and that'll be that. So there are tools that improve your skills, and there are tools that do the job for you, so that you don't have any improvement, any scope for creativity, any scope for strengthening your own abilities and your hand-eye coordination and everything that goes into art. So there are good tools and bad tools. And if a tool tells you that I'm not going to do the job for you, you use me, you struggle, and then you improve, good tool. If a tool is like, well, yeah, sure, let me know what to do, master, like that is not a tool which will ever help you reach the heights.
So you're saying the tool doesn't allow you to fail? Is that basically
it doesn't allow you to fail.
Do you think that's true?
I think the human mind is very good at adapting to the current context it lives in. When everyone can create, a basic drawing, then people aren't going to think of that as art. I agree, but then to be a master of the tool, you're not doing what you're saying. You're not just putting a prompt in. You're going to be guiding the AI. Like, you're going to be interacting with it on many levels. For instance, image generation, which you mentioned. You're going to be like, you're going to put a prompt in, you're going to fine-tune your own AI model, you might put a depth map in, you might use some other type of way to guide the AI to exactly what you want to be. You were talking about these kind of crafty things like drawing. You have to learn drawing. I guess AI is just a much more complex tool than a pencil that takes a lot longer to master. And you're also kind of discounting any computer art, I guess, when you're saying an algorithm cannot produce art. Like one of the most famous generative artists, Vera Molnar, actually came from Budapest, and all of her work is creating generative systems. So she makes a set of rules, and then the art is in curating the output of the computer. So I find that like AI as being the next step from that kind of generative work.
But let me tell you the difference between an AI-generated artwork, no matter how talented the artist might be, and no matter how intentional they would be. And when you're making your AI art intentional and the artist is really in the driver's seat, I guess that's not really AI art, right? Because the way that people are now depending upon these technologies, they're really outsourcing the thinking part. So could you be more thoughtful with a bad tool? Yes. yes, there will be the minority which will be more thoughtful. But let me tell you the difference between The Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh and some AI-generated artwork, no matter how intentional, right? Every single brushstroke in The Starry Night was intentional. Every single last one of them, not half of them, not 20% of them, not the initial prompt. Every single brushstroke was a human being going left instead of right, going up instead of down, a light touch instead of a heavy touch, and all of those hundreds of thousands of little conscious, unconscious decisions that Vincent van Gogh made resulted in the masterpiece. So even when you have some image generator and you're making the prompt, so that is your creative touch, I think it just doesn't have those hundreds of thousands of creative decisions that go into a human artwork.
So making the prompt, like as someone who uses AI deeply in my work, it's far more than making prompts. It's writing software, it's generating depth maps. But going back to what you're saying, your argument could equally apply to generative art. So like people from like the 20th century, like Harold Cohen, who is like very famous for being one of the first generative artists. He would make robots to make paintings. Or Elvira Molnar, who I mentioned before, who's from Budapest.
But are they great? Are they excellent? Are they going to be seared into the memory when you see it? Is it going to become canon? Is it going to become a classic? I mean, you could make, the question is one of greatness. The question is, where does great art come from?
So no computer-generated art can be great art, is your contention?
Tell me a computer-generated artwork that is great. And it has to actually be generated from the intention to the design. If you have a human artist who's making 90% of the, doing heavy, 90% of the thinking work and then just, exporting the sort of the manual labor of it all, I mean, we still credit architects for the building, right? We do not credit every single last person who lifted a brick to create the building. So are you just saying that AI is just going to be like a, very competent manual laborer?
Well, question on this is is art, can it still really be art? It may look like to the consumer like it is art, but if it wasn't by someone, a conscious person with something to say, with a fear to tackle or a love to express or something, can it still be described as art? In a sense, is human consciousness essential for art, or can meaning emerge without that conscious wellspring of meaning?
Absolutely not. I think it can't.
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. If an AI makes it art in the most basic way possible, and it can make someone cry, that person doesn't know it's AI. I feel like it's a piece of art. So I mean this gets down to a deeper question, like what is art?
Peeling an onion can make you cry. Like an art has to be deeper than, oh, it momentarily shocked me, right? I mean, a horror movie makes me cry. It doesn't mean it's great art.
No, you could do a double-blind test where people look at two pieces of art, one's AI generated and one's generated by a master. And if both pieces of art move someone, I would contend that both have value as art, even if the people don't know, but one of them was created by AI. So I think, that's a different debate to be had.
Yeah, but this is also my problem with the Turing test. It's like the Turing test is like, could a computer fool someone into thinking that it's not a computer? So the essential test is, could you fool someone? And I guess you could fool someone.
Implied in this seems to be a debate around how should art be looked at? Should it be about the consumer or the producer? And if you think of music, today we listen to music on CDs. But 100 years ago, most families had instruments in the house. They'd play music together.
Yeah.
The act of producing was a communal experience.
Right.
So is it, when we talk about this analysis of art as in the eyes of the beholder, in a sense, are we talking about culture or are we talking about business?
Well, and
or business model of seeing art.
Yeah, and you can like, for example, if you look at saying that beauty is in the eye of the beholder is a little bit like saying that junk food is food because it is edible. I mean, you could eat it and survive for a very long time, but it's still a very inferior type of food, right? And I don't think beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I think there are all sorts of objective reasons why beauty is beauty. I'll give you a very quick example on your point about human suffering and the actual origin of art, right? So in 1959, there was an English teacher called Anthony Burgess, and he just collapsed in the classroom. And they took him to the doctor, and they did a bunch of tests, right? And it turned out that he had inoperable brain tumor, just stage 4, absolute end of his life. The doctor told him, you barely have a few weeks to live. And he was very scared because he was a young man, he had a young wife, he was very worried for his wife. So he's like, let me try and write a best-selling book. And then my book will sustain my wife when I'm gone. And then Anthony Burgess wrote The Clockwork Orange, which did become, he wrote it in 3 weeks. It became a bestseller. It became a movie by Stanley Kubrick. It's part of Time magazine's 100 best books of the century. Anthony Burgess died in 1991, 32 years after the brain tumor diagnosis. It was a false flag. But you see how that encounter with death made him creative. The sheer fear and the stress of dying and the worry and love for his wife made him creative. AI has no stress. AI has no fear. AI cannot die. It's pure information, right? You can just upload it in some other computer. And so AI lacks that emotional foundation where art actually comes from.
So again, we're talking about AI as if it exists in a vacuum and it's not a person who's going to be using it. So I think that argument doesn't really make sense. It's never going to be, I'm going to press a button and go away and come back. It's going to be like, I'm going to guide this AI, and as I say, like a master will guide the AI more deeply. But you mentioned AI kind of, is it the business of art, or is it like...
Well, in a sense that if people played instruments, you are producing art for your own culture and community. But if you are buying a painting, you're consuming it. It's a different, you're not producing it. Yeah. And I'm wondering with that, if the creative process is part of the process of art for most people, many people draw even if they don't buy paintings, does that suggest a distinction between culture and business?
I think so, but I think it brings up another interesting point. If you are, first of all, it empowers people who don't have the skills or the mastery to be able to create together, but also...
Why do we need to empower everyone?
Okay, that's a different point. But beyond that, like a lot of these tools are being given to us by companies whose sole interest is to get us to look at our devices more and sell us stuff. So if I take your point and decide that any art that I've made by AI is invalid, I'm never going to use it again, that's leaving people who have no interest in society and culture developing in a positive way for humanity to have the tools, like, just go make money with it. I feel like having artists involved with this medium is actually essential for pushing humanity in the correct direction. AI is out of Pandora's box now. It's not going back in, like if America was like, we're going to overrule it, the rest of the world would be like, okay, now we can win. So it's like, it's out of Pandora's box. So I think separate to whether it's valid for people to make art with AI, I think having the artist viewpoint, who are some of the few members of society who can actually culturally push on a technology involved in that development, is actually really crucial.
I wouldn't necessarily disagree very heavily. I just think that, you care about the artists, right? I think what AI is telling the artist is everything the artist should not bother with, should not bother learning. Don't bother learning to paint, just use this. Don't bother learning to sketch. Your brain isn't big enough anyway. Oh, you're a human being with your emotional biases. Don't bother thinking on your own. And that's the constant demoralizing message. And if you cared for the artist, I would say you tell the artist that, no, your brain is good enough. This is the human brain that we've used to build the Sistine Chapel, and to, someone used that brain to sculpt the David sculpture Michelangelo did. So we need to empower the human brain, and with AI, there is this constant message that AI is better than, why are we creating it in the first place, right? To make up for some gap or some lack in the human cognition. And I think it hasn't been proven that there is some lack in the human cognition.
To push you on that, though, many masters in the 13th, 14th, 15th century, painters, had to make their own paints. By the 19th century, you had companies producing, or industrial producing paints that artists could use. So it saved artists an entire stage of the creative process. Could you not make the case that AI is simply saving people a stage of the creative process?
But is there a 19th century artist who did work as revolutionary and important and central to human history as Leonardo da Vinci? So maybe artists should make their own.
Well, that's very subjective.
Da Vinci, again, was a massive toolmaker. I know you massively disagree with this, but he was using the most advanced technology of the time, which took away some of his humanity. It's like, I'm going to build this tool which lets me just copy a scene rather than using it. So he was using the most time-saving tools that are available to him at the time. So I think he would be using these tools.
What is the line between assistance and authorship?
Yeah, I mean, what is the line, right? For example, like one question, another way of sort of framing this debate would be that, should, I mean, take any painter you really love, right? But let's take one that we all, again, will be familiar with, Vincent van Gogh. Should he have a talented, assistant and just dictated it to him? Like, do we believe that someone taking Vincent a very talented artist, but not Vincent, right? Do we believe that some other man or some other woman who's taking dictation from Vincent would have done as good a job? I don't think so. I think you need the artist at the absolute last mile of it. So when I write a book, and it's a relatively short book, like 20,000 words, Those are 20,000 creative decisions I made. I don't want anyone else making the creative decisions in my book. I don't want another human being to do it, so I definitely don't want the machine to do it.
I mean, I think we're thinking of it as a bit of a zero-sum game here. You're like, AI is taking away all the stuff that otherwise I would have done. I think it's the opposite. AI is free, like you say, making paints. AI is freeing me up to make a load of extra decisions I wouldn't have been able to make. Like, say I'm making a piece which involves like computer graphics. Like, I wouldn't have the money to pay someone to make like 20,000 meshes, which I have created myself by training the AI model, by giving it depth maps, so I still have creative control over it, but I wouldn't have been able to create these things without it. So I feel like it expands artist potential. It's not a zero-sum game where it's taking away decisions you would have made. You still make those decisions, but then you get to make 100 more decisions because you have more time.
Okay, you've talked about AI influencing your decisions, but also there's an interesting question of where AI content comes from. So does training AI on copyrighted or culturally significant works
Stolen content.
Well, I was going to say amount to exploitation, does it? You think
absolutely.
it does?
I mean, there is no way to, for example, there is a gallery in Italy which owns the copyright of the David sculpture. So you can't actually put that famous face of David on your books, for example, because there's a gallery that owns that copyright. And maybe that's a bit excessive, right? I mean, 600 years have passed, 400 years have passed. Let's be a little more liberal on that front. But yeah, AI, Sam Altman released a short story written by ChatGPT. And it was basically trained on, who's the author of Lolita? Nabokov. Nabokov. Yeah, so it was trained on Nabokov's work, and it read like Nabokov's work, and it like had lines straight up lifted from Nabokov, and they were like, oh, AI wrote this original short story, but it was just ripping off another human artist. And so, yeah, I mean, if it's basically a very glorified plagiarization machine.
So this is version 1 of AI, and clearly there's a lot of issues with copyright, and I disagree with AI being used on work that wasn't given permission to be used, but this is version 1, and I guess tech bros be tech broing and kind of, move fast and break things. But as time goes on, I hope we're going to get more ethical AI models. Already Adobe, has their kind of like image generation tool trained on images that they own the copyright for. So I think this is just a temporary bump in the road. Tech bros will be tech broing and like, doing naughty things, but I don't think that's the future of models.
Can I ask you a devil's advocate question for both of you on this? That if you go to any city square where there's an art school, you will always find art students sitting around the square drawing the cathedral.
Right.
They are literally, they are learning from the masters. They are looking at the statue, and they are learning to paint or to sculpt like Michelangelo.
Yeah.
And so is AI simply not a very good art student who gets up early in the morning?
Yeah, it doesn't have to sleep, right? It's again that thing about like, okay, so you stand in front of a huge cathedral, and the shadow of the building is falling on you, and you are tiny before it, and you have a physical relationship with that building, and maybe you feel outsized, which you are, and you cannot, you experience awe, and you experience terror, perhaps, and you experience fear that you will never do anything this grand and beautiful. And can AI, if I make a robot stand in front of a cathedral, is that robot ever, load it with your favorite image generation tool and load it with your favorite LLM and just give it all the nanochips that you want to give it, that robot is never going to feel awe and terror and beauty the way that I would or the way that an art student would. And that's why it cannot really, be a good art student or a good artist.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're going around in circles a little, like with the AI is just a tool that doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Well, let's move on to a different question then. So we hear this term AI slop, that the internet is just people say it's a slop of AI.
Beautiful
Does
word.
AI risk homogenizing art?
I think it's going to allow new expressions. Like you were saying, realist portraiture disappeared after AI, but like painters like Magritte still painted realist stuff, but they were free to explore surrealism. They were like, no, I no longer have to picture the world. I can picture what's in my imagination. And I feel like we're at the first stage of AI. We're not going to lose craftsmanship. People are still going to draw. People are still going to paint. But a lot of people are going to be freed up to create new forms of art, which are based on this kind of free. I mean, like the Industrial Revolution gave people more time free from labor. This is similar. It's more time free from craftsmanship. Craftsmanship will still stay around, but master craftsmen will use this as just a tool in their toolbox to expand their ideas. And all art is a remix. And as you say, AI is just a massive remix engine. But if you use a massive remix engine in collaboration with you as a master artist who knows what constitutes art, who's had these experiences you're talking about, then I feel like it expands your possibilities, and what comes out still is art.
But it's still this mechanical way of talking about art which I take issue with, right? I don't think art is just a remix engine, and this sort of the very metaphor of an engine, just like put everything together and press, mix, it's not that. It's not a mixer. It's not an engine. It's really a human soul trying to expand itself. And you're right. You would say, oh, well, it's just a tool, and why can't an artist now use AI along with the other tools to also create art? Fair enough. I mean, then you're reducing AI to just a tool, and I'm okay with people using the tools that they want to use. But AI slop is such a big problem. I don't think that it's very obvious that AI is naturally going to improve the creative state of the world. I mean, when you look at the physical health of people, I think one of my friends shared a chart yesterday on Twitter, which was about how right now this is the first time in human history that there are more obese kids than there are undernourished, malnourished kids. It's the first time that the lines have crossed, right? So I don't think it's very obvious. I don't think physical health necessarily always improves. I don't think mental health always improves. I don't think creativity improves because of technology. I'm not so optimistic. I think what technology tells us is, I got this. Don't worry about it. Don't think about it. I'll handle it, And in that process of becoming lazier and in that process of outsourcing what should have been your sovereign artistic choice, I think the more people rely on AI, the happier they're going to be with slop and the more comfortable they're going to be with just homogenized aesthetics, which is not ugly. It's not necessarily, terrible to look at, but it's empty.
Yeah. In 2 minutes, I'm going to open up to questions. Get your questions ready. But I'll just combine 2 questions here to end this bit, which is, could widespread AI art, do you think it's going to devalue human-made works or make us appreciate them more? And the second part of that is, do you think AI-generated art will ever be displayed, collected, and celebrated like human-made pieces? Will people queue at museums to see what ChatGPT 20 generated?
It's already happening. There's a Biennale in Budapest right now of media art where some of the works are AI, and people are going there. And like you're talking about AI slop, as I say, human brains are very good at normalizing to context, and people will be like, "This is AI slop." I guess the meaning of a master will be transcend above that. It's like this is something truly unique that I haven't seen before. And that, I mean, we're talking a lot about image generation, but I think that's going to be combining AI with robotics, with methods that we haven't really thought of, because it's we're still at the birth of this new way of thinking. And I agree with you that AI is going to make it's going to have negative consequences. It's going to make large swaths of the population more lazy, but it's like any technology. It's neutral, but you can definitely make AI with it. As a tool, it's neutral.
Yeah, I feel like it's not neutral. My suspicion is that the way it's this constant pulling out of yourself. It's this constant sort of like hey, just train the robot to paint. Just train the LLM to write. I think art happens inside you. It happens in your heart, it happens in your guts, it happens in your brain, it happens in your body. And the more the tools are like pulling you out of yourself, the less of an artist you become. I think the actual alpha, the actual, the edge lies in sort of having a very deeply centered soul. And that's what AI is interfering with, because it's putting words in your head, right? So for example, how people walk around with those meta glasses, right? And so they're walking around a garden, a park, and they're looking at things, and they're interacting with the glass, and they're like, oh, what is that flower? Or, what shape is that cloud, right? I think that's a problem because they're not daydreaming. They're not getting bored.
This goes back to the point that I was mentioning earlier, that's because capitalism is driving AI. They want you to spend as much time immersed in this solo digital experience to sell you stuff as possible. And if creative people aren't involved in the development of that technology, it's just going to go further and further into this direction.
We're going to have to end it there. All right. So now, time for audience questions. Lady at the back there has a question.
How would you define art?
How would you define art?
Yeah.
How long have they got? Right, go ahead.
No, I'll do a short one. Art is an act of you're creating something to externalize what is inside you. It can be an emotion. It can be love. So like a love poem is you're externalizing your emotion. You can externalize regret. You can externalize hope. You can have a very hopeful painting. You can externalize fear. That famous Edvard Munch painting of the Scream. You're externalizing anguish. But the AI has nothing inside it. So there's nothing to externalize.
Yeah, I would agree with everything apart from the last part.
Yeah.
Art is a way of expressing yourself. It's an activity you do to express yourself. It's a way of communicating with people via non-linguistic methods. And I think art can, like I said at the beginning, art is an activity that you engage in to express what's inside. And art is a way, when people experience it, often they don't directly get what the artist made. It's an experience that someone has with a piece of art that makes it art as well.
Yeah. Ian McGilchrist.
I think the whole conversation could have been different if it had not been based on visual art. So there is a way in which AI can be seen as clearly under the determination of the artist if we're talking about creating a visual piece. But what about, can it spontaneously write poetry? Can it spontaneously produce deep, moving music? I'm putting it to you.
Music, poetry. We've discussed visual art here.
Yeah.
Just for those, the sound wasn't great on that, but he was saying that we were looking at visual art, but there are other forms of art. Poetry, music. Can AI generate meaningful poetry and music?
No, it can't generate music because music has a rhythm. We relate to music because we are rhythmic, right? Your heart beats at a certain rhythm. Your blood flows at a certain rhythm. You breathe in a certain rhythm. So you're composed of rhythms, and then an artist comes along and he's really the master of rhythms. And the reason you're able to enjoy his music is because you have rhythms inside you. The AI has no rhythms inside it. It has no, expansion of the diaphragm as it breathes, and it's not built on that sort of, almost musical, biological rhythm that we are built out of. So no, I don't think AI is ever going to give us like a musical masterpiece that people will, really enjoy and will sort of have a profound religious experience with.
I think when it comes to written stuff, because it's such a direct relation, it's challenging. Because at the moment we live in the time of LLM, so it's like if you put a prompt in, it's going to give you a whole piece of text. So the AI has a very, it's harder to guide it in a direction. Whereas if something like music, it's easier to use AI as just a tool. You can be like, I want this synth line, and then I'm going to make it part of a larger composition. So it's this whole kind of thing we've been backwards and forwards about. It's like, does it exist in a vacuum, or is it just a tool? And I think with the correct guidance, you can make art with any type of art with AI.
Thank you. And this gentleman at the back there.
I think of art as something that's about appreciation of another person's work. I've never thought of it as appreciation for the work of another machine, but that then, it poses a question for me, which is, suppose I had an idea of something I wanted to create, so I can explain that, but I explained it to you and asked you to create it, then whose piece of work is it? And how would that work if I'm giving that prompt or that idea to a machine? Whose piece of work is it? Whose art is it?
I mean, if you give it to an AI, which is just a very complicated statistical algorithm, then I think it's your piece of art. If you give it to a human, then it's a collaboration between both of you.
Go ahead.
No, I think that's right.
Anyone else with a question? Just put your hand up high. There's a gentleman here in just 2 rows. There you go.
If a piece is created and you as an observer, you look at it and that piece was created by an AI, but you don't recognize if it's created by an AI or not. How would you still say that it doesn't create AI?
Yeah. It's like if I saw a beautiful, tempting lake in a desert, and I go towards it and I realize it's a mirage, I got fooled. That doesn't mean the water was there, right? It just means that I got fooled. So could AI fool me? I'm sure it could sometimes fool me, but that doesn't mean that that makes it art, right? Fooling someone into thinking something doesn't mean you actually did the thing that you fooled them about.
So art is objective. A thing is or is not an art.
Yeah, I think it is. It either has that sort of human intention really embedded. I think it could be embedded very deeply, or it could be embedded very in a very shallow way. But if it's shallow, then you lose to the human the depth, right? So I think people often say this, that AI is not going to replace human beings, but people who use AI are going to replace people who do not use AI. I think it's the other way around. I think AI is not going to replace human beings, and people who don't use AI are going to replace people who use AI.
Okay, so we have time probably for 2 more questions. There's a gentleman here with the beard.
Do you think that current LLMs being predictive and averaging at least are missing a lot of components to make good art? Because if it's average and predictive.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, it's just the LLM is trained to predict. You're right. It's trained to predict the next obvious word, and so you're obviously optimizing for what's been done before. You're optimizing for what's most expected. If you're going to set up your program that way, then a novel line, an interesting idea, is going to register as an error. But the reason it's set up to predict the next most obvious word is that it's set up to fool us. That's the problem. It's not set up to actually be creative. I don't think Sam Altman cares about creativity or art. I think if he wanted there to be more great books in the world, he would have tried writing a great book. I think these people care about being entrepreneurs. They care about creating billion-dollar companies, and they're good at that. But they don't fundamentally care about pushing the frontier of human expression. And if you don't care about something, you're never going to manage to do it.
But that's like the biggest company making the stock out-of-the-box AI like that everyone uses, ChatGPT. And I agree with you. Like, Sam Altman isn't interested in making great art. He's interested in selling subscriptions. But when you're a master of using tools, you don't just use it out of the box. If you wanted to create something unique using AI, you would fine-tune the AI on a corpus of your work that showed it how you wanted it to act. You wouldn't just be like, write me a poem.
One last question from the gentleman in the front row here.
Walter Benjamin described art in his essay as having an aura. Other commentators talk about great art being sublime. And so Rothko's Chapel is a good example of this kind of... and so is there, when you start thinking about art as having an aura and being sublime, it's also metaphysics surrounding it. So hypothetically, could AI create a religion? And if so, Neil, would you subscribe to it?
I mean, he has already, right?
I hope that I would not become part of an AI cult, but...
Oops.
Yeah.
It's an interesting question, because the church was a great supporter of the arts. Most of the art we have was through the church in the West. So.
Yeah, an actual supporter of actual arts, yes.
I want to bring back on the screen the question that was raised at the beginning. AI can't create real art. And you remember the yeses were just slightly ahead. So if you still agree with the proposition, indeed if you've joined the proposition, please clap now as loud as you can.
Woo!
And if you disagree with the proposition, if you think AI can create real art, clap now.
So close.
Pretty close.
Well, it's an interesting result. It looks like there's a slight advantage on the yes, but still pretty close.
Pretty close.
And great. Please give it up for Jash Dholani and Neil Mendoza. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Nice job.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thanks.
We'll be right back.